Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez. The love story Hollywood couldn't forget. There are some love stories that burn brightly for a moment and disappear. And then there are the rare ones that seem to refuse time itself. Love stories that begin in glamour, collapse under pressure, and then years later, return like a song you thought had ended long ago. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez had that kind of story. It was a romance born under flashbulbs and headlines. A romance so famous it earned its own nickname. A romance the world watched with fascination, judgment, obsession, and disbelief. Because this was never just about two celebrities dating. This was about two people meeting at the height of fame, trying to hold on to something real while the world turned them into a spectacle. It was about timing. It was about pressure. It was about the difference between the love you feel in private and the life you are forced to live in public. And more than anything, it was about one haunting idea. What if the right person comes into your life at the wrong time? And what if years later, fate gives you one more chance? This is the story of Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, a love story Hollywood never stopped talking about. A love story that ended and then began again. And for a while, it looked like destiny had finally corrected itself. Chapter 1, 2 stars, 2 worlds, 1 collision. When Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez first crossed paths in 2002, they were already enormous public figures. Jennifer Lopez was more than a star. She was a phenomenon. She had built herself into one of the most recognizable women in the world, moving between music, film, fashion, and celebrity culture with rare force. Ben Affleck, meanwhile, was one of Hollywood's biggest leading men, already known for both blockbuster fame and serious industry prestige. They met while working on Geely, the film that brought them together in the early 2000s. Public accounts of their timeline consistently marked 2002 as the beginning of the relationship. And maybe that was part of the danger from the very beginning. They did not meet in obscurity. They met in the glare of celebrity. They met at a time when every movement, every look, every rumor could become front-page material. They were beautiful, famous, glamorous, and impossible to ignore. Together, they did not look like an ordinary couple. They looked like an event. And the world responded exactly the way it always does when it senses a modern myth forming. It stared. Chapter 2, The Birth of Bennifer. Very quickly, Ben and Jennifer became more than a relationship. They became Bennifer. Reuters noted that in the early 2000s, they were among the most talked about couples in celebrity culture, with media fascination so intense that their romance became a symbol of tabloid-era obsession. Reports from that period and later retrospectives also note the pink diamond engagement ring that helped define the scale and spectacle of the relationship. And that nickname matters. Because once a couple gets turned into a brand, something shifts. The relationship stops belonging only to the two people inside it. It becomes public property, an image, a talking point, a product for the culture to consume. That is what happened to Ben and Jennifer. They were no longer just falling in love. They were becoming one of the most photographed, analyzed, and commercialized romances in Hollywood history. Every appearance fed the frenzy. Every photo added to the mythology. Every gesture became content before content culture had even fully arrived. And under all of that noise, two human beings were trying to have a relationship. That is much harder than people think. Because fame does not just expose love. It distorts it. Chapter 3, A Love Story Wrapped in Excess. The early Bennifer era had a kind of almost unreal intensity. Luxury, headlines, red carpets, paparazzi, public fascination, constant speculation. From the outside, it looked dazzling. This was the age of celebrity culture at full volume, and Ben and Jennifer were one of its biggest symbols. Reuters later described their early 2000s relationship as one marked by over-the-top public attention, including the famous engagement ring and nonstop tabloid scrutiny. But glamour can be deceptive. Sometimes the most glamorous relationships are also the least protected. Because people assume beauty and fame create strength. In reality, they often create exposure. And exposure is not the same thing as intimacy. That may be one of the key truths at the center of this story. The world saw sparkle, but no one really knew what it cost to live inside that much attention. No one knew how hard it was to tell the difference between real emotion and public performance when cameras were always waiting. No one knew whether Ben and Jennifer were living their love story or being swallowed by it. Chapter 4: The Engagement That Captured an Era. Later in 2002, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez became engaged. That engagement quickly became one of the defining celebrity stories of the decade, and the pink diamond ring became part of pop culture history. Reuters and later AP coverage both treated their engagement as one of the central landmarks of the Bennifer saga. An engagement is supposed to feel like certainty, promise, a narrowing of the world down to one person. And perhaps for them, it did feel that way. Because when people move toward marriage, they are not choosing a headline. They are choosing hope. They are choosing the belief that the noise can be survived, that the outside world may be loud, but the inside world can still remain sacred. Ben and Jennifer looked like two people who had found something electric in each other. They had chemistry. They had magnetism. They had the kind of visual presence that made them feel larger than life. And maybe privately, they also had tenderness. Maybe there were quiet conversations behind all the flash. Maybe there were ordinary moments hidden inside the extraordinary ones. That is what makes stories like this heartbreaking later, because even in the most famous relationships, there are always unseen human moments that the public never gets to keep. Chapter 5: When the Spotlight Becomes Too Bright. As their wedding approached in 2003, the pressure surrounding them became overwhelming. A People retrospective on the period described how the couple postponed their planned September 2003 wedding amid intense media attention, while Reuters later summarized that they abruptly called off the wedding and split a few months later under the weight of extreme public scrutiny. Lopez herself later reflected publicly that, as the wedding neared, it no longer felt like they were going to make it. This is where the Bennifer story turns from glamorous to tragic. Because the world often assumes that celebrity couples break apart because their love was never real. But sometimes the love is real. And the problem is everything around it. The cameras, the commentary, the pressure of becoming an object of obsession, the feeling that your relationship is no longer a private emotional space, but a public arena. Imagine trying to plan a wedding while the world treats your marriage like a global entertainment event. Imagine trying to know your own heart while millions of strangers keep telling you what your love means. At some point, that pressure changes the atmosphere around everything. It gets into the decisions. It gets into the trust. It gets into the future. Love may still be there, but peace is gone. Chapter 6: The First Ending. In January 2004, their relationship officially ended. Reuters and AP both placed their original breakup in the early months of 2004, after the wedding postponement and months of speculation. Lopez later said that the breakup was devastating for her, describing it publicly years later as an immense heartbreak. And just like that, the fairy tale collapsed. No wedding, no happy ending, no triumph over the spotlight, only silence where certainty had once been. This is what made their story linger. Because it didn't end with closure. It ended with unfinished emotion, with a sense that something powerful had broken before it had the chance to become what it wanted to be. And the world, which had helped create the pressure, moved on the way the world always does. On to the next headline, the next couple, the next scandal, the next fascination. But some love stories do not vanish simply because the public stops staring. They go underground. They live in memory. They stay unresolved inside the people who lived them. Chapter 7: Separate Lives, Separate Marriages, Unfinished History. After their split, both moved on into major new chapters of life. Reuters noted that Lopez later married Mark Anthony, while Affleck went on to marry Jennifer Garner. Both marriages later ended in divorce. By the time the 2020s arrived, both Ben and Jennifer had lived full, complicated adult lives beyond the Bennifer years. And that matters because their reunion years later was not a case of two untouched people returning to a paused romance. It was two people returning after life had happened. After marriages. After children. After public reinventions, after disappointments, after lessons, time had changed them. And sometimes that is the cruelest part of timing in love. You can meet the right person too early, too young, too exposed, too unprepared for what loving each other will demand. Then life teaches you who you are. And only later do you understand what you once had. Chapter 8: The Reunion Nobody Could Ignore. In 2021, nearly 2 decades after their first breakup, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez reunited. Reuters reported that the renewed romance became visible in spring 2021, soon after Lopez ended her engagement to Alex Rodriguez. By June 2021, Reuters was already describing Bennifer as having returned, and later Reuters coverage in 2024 described their reunion as a remarkable second chance after almost 20 years apart. This was the chapter no one expected. Because lost love stories are supposed to remain in the past. They are supposed to become nostalgic anecdotes, not living realities. And yet here they were. Again. Not as reckless 20-somethings. Not as tabloid mythology at its peak. But as older, more experienced people who had lived enough life to understand loss. That is what made the reunion so emotionally powerful to so many people. It was not just romantic. It was redemptive. It suggested that maybe time had not destroyed the connection. Maybe it had deepened it. Maybe the first failure had not proved they were wrong for each other. Maybe it had only proved they were not ready yet. That idea is irresistible to people. The idea that love can wait. The idea that history can reopen. The idea that life might offer a second chance to get something right. Chapter 9: A Second Engagement. Different kind of hope. In April 2022, Lopez announced they were engaged again. People later reported that this second engagement came after the 2021 reunion and led quickly into marriage that same year. The second engagement carried a different emotional weight from the first. The first had the energy of passion and spectacle. The second carried memory, perspective, the knowledge of what had already been lost once. That changes everything. A first love says, I want this. The second chance love says, I know what it means to lose this. And that is often more powerful. By now, the public was not just fascinated by Bennifer because they were glamorous. The fascination had evolved. People were invested because the story had matured into something deeper than celebrity romance. It had become a story about timing, regret, endurance, and whether emotional truth can survive decades. Ben and Jennifer no longer represented a tabloid fantasy. They represented a possibility many people secretly long for. That the great love you lost may not be gone forever. Chapter 10: Las Vegas, then Georgia. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez married in Las Vegas in July 2022, then held a larger wedding celebration in Georgia in August 2022. Reuters 2024 reporting and AP's divorce coverage both refer back to the Las Vegas ceremony and the later Georgia celebration as the formal realization of their long-delayed love story. And for a while, it felt like the impossible had happened. The story that once ended in postponement and heartbreak had become a marriage. The couple that the world once watched fall apart had found their way back to the altar. This is why the Bennifer reunion felt so cinematic. It was not merely a romance. It was a rewritten ending. Or at least, that is how it seemed. There is something profoundly emotional about two people marrying after having once lost each other. Because the wedding is no longer just about the future. It is also about the past. About everything that failed to happen before. About every year in between. About all the other lives they lived before arriving, older and changed, at the same emotional destination. For a while, it felt as though fate had finally become kind. Chapter 11: The Dream of the Happy Ending. After the wedding, the Bennifer story took on almost mythic resonance. Reuters noted that Lopez herself publicly framed their reunion as a kind of long-awaited happy ending after the heartbreak of the original breakup. Coverage around Lopez's 2024 creative projects also showed how central the relationship remained to her emotional and artistic imagination. That may be why this chapter mattered so much to people. Because everyone wants to believe in the repaired ending. The love story that was broken, then healed. The almost marriage that becomes a real one. The relationship that was once defeated by pressure, now made stronger by maturity. It is one of the oldest human fantasies. Not just finding love, but finding your way back to it after loss. And maybe Ben and Jennifer believed in that too. Maybe they believed that time had given them what they lacked before: wisdom, distance, emotional readiness, perspective. Maybe for a while that belief was enough. Chapter 12: The Final Fracture. But in August 2024, Lopez filed for divorce, and by early 2025, the divorce was finalized. AP reported that the couple had reached a settlement through mediation and were officially declared single in February 2025. Reuters reported that the filing came exactly 2 years after their larger Georgia wedding celebration. And this is what makes the Bennifer story so haunting. Even the second chance did not last. Even the reunion, the marriage, the reclaimed dream, all of it still could not secure permanence. Which forces a painful question. What was this story really about? Was it about destiny? Or was it about timing twice failing in different ways? Was it proof that true love can return? Or proof that returning love is not always enough to defeat reality? Maybe the answer is more complicated. Maybe some people are genuinely important to each other and still cannot build a lasting life together. Maybe love can be real and still not survive. Maybe emotional truth and practical permanence are not the same thing. Those are difficult truths, but difficult truths are often what makes stories unforgettable. Ending: the love story Hollywood never let go. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez remain one of the most iconic celebrity romances of the modern era because their story contains something bigger than gossip. It contains longing. It contains memory. It contains the ache of unfinished things. They met in fame. They fell hard. They became mythology. They broke apart. They built separate lives. They found each other again. They married. And then, even after all that, they still could not make the story last forever. And maybe that is exactly why people cannot stop thinking about them. Because Bennifer was never just a celebrity relationship. It was a story about the mystery of timing, about how love can be overwhelming, real, life-changing, and still vulnerable to forces outside itself, about how the heart remembers what the calendar cannot erase, about how sometimes the most unforgettable love stories are not the ones that last the longest, but the ones that return. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez gave the world one of those stories. A story of first love, public pressure, separation, memory, reunion, hope, and loss. A story that looked, for one radiant moment, like Hollywood's greatest romantic comeback. And even though it ended again, the emotional power of it remains. Because some love stories do not become legendary because they are perfect. They become legendary because they are human, messy, beautiful, interrupted, unfinished. And Bennifer, more than almost any modern romance, was all of those things.